Hello everyone and welcome back to my class. And I suppose many of you already have listened to my lecture. And this summer 2021 we are going to cover this very lovely topic of American church history. Last semester, I have offered a lesson on general church history, the early church history, and this one is American church history. So we'll have 10 weeks of discussing the subject of American church history. And before we go into any further discussion of actual contents of American church history, I suppose there are some new students who are new to my class. So for the sake of being informative, I'll try to introduce myself, your instructor for 10 weeks of study together. So my name is Hwang, and in Chinese, since we have quite a few Chinese speaking students, I suppose that's how I write my name in Chinese character. So that's the name, and that means yellow. I think that's the last name originated from China. And Sung means the holiness or holy, and Su means excellency or outstanding. So that's the name given my grandfather, who was an elder in a Christian church. So I'm actually the third generation Christian, and I'm an ordained pastor, ordained from a Southern Baptist convention at the Southern Baptist Church. And I could consider myself as my cultural identity as 1.5 generation intercultural, meaning, I went to Africa when I was a teenager, and then studied junior high school there, and then came back to Korea again. So during those years of my teen age, I was able to contact with different culture. So that's kind of 1.5 generation, right? And then I'm working as a hospice chaplain. The hospice is a program that designed for the people, the patient who has 6 months or less to live. So that's what I do also. And I consider myself as a diaspora, biblical Christian diaspora, because like I said, I lived in Africa for a few years, and then came back to Korea, or went back to Korea, and did my college, university, and some of my masters there, and then worked about 8-10 years with the University Christian Fellowship, which is a campus ministry. That's global international organization, if you are familiar with it. And then I came to America to study further in seminaries. I've done some seminary works. So let me introduce my education. Graduated from the Yonsei University in Seoul, one of the best schools, the college and university in Korea. And then did my master's degree, Master in Arts, in missiology. I studied the study of the mission. And it's the Asian Center for Theological Studies, and which had offered like a combined joint degree with a fuller theological seminary in Pasadena, right up north here. And then I came to U.S. in 1993 to study at the Fuller Theological Seminary. Started as Master in Divinity, then transferred to Golden Gate Theological Seminary, which is a Southern Baptist seminary. Got the degree on Master in Divinity. Then also continued my study with a Fuller, doing some PhD courses there under Dr. Clinton. If you have read some of the Christian leadership books, he's one of the best-known authority on the Christian leadership. And I almost finished, except the dissertation. And then went to William Carey International University later on to do my PhD degree, completed my PhD degree in there. And my focus of the study there was international development, which actually is a study of mission. And my dissertation was about diaspora, biblical diaspora, studying the narratives. So that's basically my the education, which comes up to my spirituality. The spirituality is different from A Christian to B Christian. I mean, we are not same. We are not like same exact product. No one is same. Our fingerprints are all different. There's no same fingerprints. Our DNA is different. Some million and billions of different DNAs. Same for the spirituality. Even if you're a Christian, I mean, none of us are the same, have the same spirituality. But these are some of them you can, relate with. I'm a born-again Christian, having received Jesus Christ in a very personal way, and have experience of, the Holy Spirit coming, and so that's some signs of a born-again believers. So I'm sure I myself is a born-again Christian with the assurance of that eternal salvation. And I consider myself as a biblical Christian, believing that Bible is only authority and the final authority in the matters of life and death, and the spirit, body, and soul, and everything that has to do with the human existence. So that's a definition of my biblical Christian. So according to that, I'm certainly a biblical Christian, believing in the full authority of the biblical text, which also, again, is called evangelicals. Evangelicals are the believers who finds their foundation in the Bible and Bible only, nothing else. But I said a reforming evangelical. The forms in the Christianity, whether it's a worship or it's a form of rituals, whatever that has to do with the formality of religion, by the Christianity as religion, it could be changed depending on the time and the place. So that's Reformation. But Reformation not only deals with the formality of the religion, but it also has to do with the contents. So, I mean, people are evil. Yeah, anyone, even the Christian, we are still have that intention of evil yet to be, removed. But on the process of getting that to be done, we are still vulnerable to this evil influence within and without. So that demands reformation within the church, as you know, who are going to churches, whether it's Korean church, Chinese church, Filipino church, or the white church, black church. We have to deal with this issue of us being declining, sliding back, and sinning. So it takes a continual reformation. So that's my belief, to be reformed, and every now and then. Then I consider myself as a Christian who has holistic perspective. Christianity is not a religion, to my understanding. It's more than a religion. It's lifestyle, and it is life itself. And it is a worldview, and it is your value and your uttermost motive. That's what the spirituality is about. So to me, the Bible has to be irrelevant. It has to be relevant to everything that we do. The cultures, politics, social justice, racial issues, the marriage, and then money making, the work, all these things are all related, relevant. So you have to look at these things from your biblical point of view and try to live out. Okay. Let me take my coat off. Yeah, it is summer and it's getting warmer. That's natural. So holistic faith is one very key characteristic of evangelical faith. Of course, there are some fundamental believers who are also within the evangelical circle. They are not so holistic, but I consider myself a holistic Christian. Excuse me. Then, I'm rather kingdom-oriented believer rather than the church-oriented. That takes a lot of explanation, so let me just skip over. Then I'm a rather rational believer than emotional believer. I mean, there's nothing wrong to be emotional or have tendency to be emotional in your faith and your lifestyle and your character and trait and personality. So I'm not accusing anyone of being emotional, but I am created and built more inclining to the rational characteristic and the trait and personality. Thus, for me, it is natural to be rational rather than emotional. So I love being logical, the things that are making sense, and has to be very explanatory. It has to make sense, even with the faith. So that's a kind of Christian I am. So introducing that, we'll begin with the syllabus of this American church history, summer 2021. Okay, let us begin the very first week of this class. Objectives. This is just general objectives of this particular lesson. First, to have overall timeline, like a people and events in American church history. Yeah, we are dealing with American church history. So I want you to have just overall perspective, the timeline and what happened later and how they are related chronically. So that is very, that's fundamental to doing any kind of history, people and events in the sequence, which comes earlier and which comes later. So you should be able to have that, understanding. And then to understand the implications. That's basic reason for doing history. So we like to, investigate and elaborate on the implications of the people and events that had happened with the American church. When we say American church, actually we have to deal with the Catholic Church and other denomination, the Protestant church. But I'll try to focus more on the Protestant side of American church history. Not only because I'm a Protestant myself, and I do know more, have more accurate information regarding the Protestant history, American history, rather than Catholic one. That's one reason. Another reason is actually in American church history, the Catholics, they have very early, works by some Spanish missions and so on, but they did not take the major parts in American church history. So they all usually and always so far works as one of the minority in a Christian faith. So that's another reason. To make appropriate applications. When you learn something, whether it's elementary school, at home, or in a college level, or even graduate level, PhD, it's the same. You're not doing this study for the sake of doing this study. The education is not a sit down and desk classroom work. That's very old idea about the education. Especially, if you're studying in America, the American education, we know that America is a very practical nation. That the practicality is very emphasized in its culture. It has to be very practical. Same thing with our education, the learning. When you learn something, it has to be practiced. It needs to change your mind, your views, your thinking. Not only that, it has to change your life, your behavior, your work. So that's called applications. So we need to apply what we have learned to actual reality, the life itself. So that's the whole, general objectives of this class. There are some other goals that the under these objectives, but we will not discuss those. Okay, so that's basically the very objectives that we are aiming during this 10 weeks of class. The basic requirements, of course, attendance. I mean, you're not able to do that physical attendance, so I feel sorry about that. You know, I hope we'll just be able to see in person very soon once this pandemic is over. But until then, your attendance is counted as you watch this lecture on your laptop or whatever, and then take that time of listening and watching this lecture, a virtual lecture. So that's counted 50% of your grade. And the readings, they're primary books and secondary books. The primary first book is required. I'll let you know which one is required. And that's 20% of your class. And the thing is, I have to do like a faith grading, meaning you have to be really faithful to yourself, honest to yourself, and tell me and the school that if you have read, you should read whole book at least once. And when you do that, you get that 20%. And you have to be honest, because there's no way of checking it. I'm not asking you to write the reading report on. And then there is report. You need to decide one topic of your choice from this American church history, whether it's a person, people, or whether it's an event, or whether it's a certain issue. For example, you can write about a black church in America. And this report is, since we are at the college level, it's a 10-page double-space letter size, and the letter size 10 in Word program, the Microsoft Word. So 10 size letter, 10 page, double space on the subject of your choice. And then we have quizzes and exams. I'm not sure how we are going to be able to do this, but if we are not able to carry out this quiz and exams, the 20% will be given for everyone. So everyone who registered for this class will probably get 20% automatically. But I will try to devise some ways to carry out or execute those quiz and exams. The exams are just midterm and final. There are 2 exams in just regular in-person class. But this being a virtual class, we'll need to think about this. But that's how I'm going to grade you. Grading, just as usual, A, B, C, D, and fail. If you score under 60, bring from 60% and under. That includes 60%, not 59%, it's 60%. So if you're 60% and under, that fails, and now you have to take this class again sometime in the future. So knowing that, do your best. You may, most likely you'll have at least 20%, and then if you can attend the full 10 weeks without absent, that's going to count you 50%. That means you're going to at least be able to do D. But we don't want to stop at D. I want you to all to be an A. Okay. Here are the books to read. These two books that I suggest, these are, probably the most popular, easy to read. First one, The American Church History, A Reader. That's very basic, by Henry Bolden. So there are paperbacks. Either you go Amazon or Google it, and then you can just buy it cheap, under $10. So you can buy those. Unfortunately, we don't have online PDF on this particular book. Then second book is The Religious History of America, the heart of the America story from colonial times to today. And it's by several couple authors co-writing, and it's a little thicker, and it has more stories in it. So if you're really interested into it, you can read it. So it's religious history, not just Christian church. So that includes some other religions like Buddhism, even the Judaism, the Jewish religion, and so on, and has Catholic stories in it too. So the first book is a must-read. That's counting 20%. Okay. Now, this is the actual discussion of the subject. Part 1, American Church History. 3 topics that you need to understand or define, at least. You should be able to define before we even go further into actual this narratives. So this is like an introduction, and there's 3 chapters in this part 1: American, and church, and history. Of course, easy. So let's go. America, chapter 1. How are you going to define America or American? America probably easier to define, because the America that we are talking about is not North and South America. Generally speaking, that's what it is. So when we talk about America, there are 2 different the definitions, the term-wise. First, North and South America included, that's whole America. Canada, USA, Mexico, then all these middle Central American countries, and then the South America, down to the end of Chile and Argentina. So that's whole America. But in this class, when we say America, it's USA, United States of America. We know that the name America came from Amerigo Vespucci, who supposedly found the land of America. There are some different discussions on that, but it's either Amerigo Vespucci or Columbus. Who cares? So that name came from that person. But when we talk about the American church history, it's church history of USA, United States of America, before it actually became United States of America. We know that there are like 17 colonial states that gathered together to form that first United States of America. Then later on added several states, a lot more states actually, and then we have 50 states plus some other island, for example Puerto Rico, right? So anyway, so that's how we are going to define the term America. That's USA from now on. And when we also say America, it's not only it's a nation, it is a geographic America. The bordering to north Canada and to south Mexico. That's the whole country of America. And then there's Alaska, Hawaii, and some other island like a Guam. So that's a very vast land, and that's geographic America. So no, we don't want to exclude Hawaii, Alaska, or some of other territory of United States of America. And also, when we say America, it means American people. So America, usually American, is associated with American. Now, when we say in the United States of America, when we say American, what does that mean? This is very complex thing. I mean, it has something to do with the church history, but not that close. But still, we have to discuss that. Does that mean only exclusive to citizens, those who have the citizenship? Either you have to be born here, or you have to be naturalized. That's the word that they use, technical use. You need to be naturalized to be an American citizen by going through all that paper process and doing the declaration, whatever. Or there are what we call legal residences. These legal residences include those green card holders and also who has a long-term visa to stay in America. And then we have undocumented people who either has their visa expired and they still stay in America, or some of them came through the border, south or north, and just came in secret without visa, without having to have that proper documentation. Actually, the first settlers that we are going to discuss soon, those who came from with the Mayflower ship, the Puritans, they were undocumented. They didn't have the documents to enter this country. That's a kind of irony. And so they are the first American But are they really first American? That's another question. And let's take a short break, and I'll come back to discuss that issue. Okay, let us continue with that discussion of who the Americans are. Before the break, we discussed the fact that there were undocumented people. From the American natives' point of view, they are actually aliens, just like some of us are called today. These aliens, the white people, came to America without having to have the permission to enter by Native Americans. So technically speaking, they are invaders. Even though their motive was to come to America to have freedom of worship, still from subjective point of view, as a third person, it's not exactly what the history trying to portray. So that's kind of, it concerns me. The American people, there were many Native Americans already living on this land for thousand years. So the story of America did not begin with the white European coming in and making settlement. I just want to make sure that that's how we should, see the history. We have to be very subjective about, the objective about doing the history. But it is very difficult because the history is written by someone who would have a somewhat subjective perspective. You cannot avoid it. You cannot be 100% objective. That's not possible for any human being. So knowing that, the history is a subject of interpretation. You cannot present history with very 100% objective facts. Facts are facts when you look at that facts only. But you can either eliminate or add certain facts to bring certain interpretation. That's how tricky is the history. So always remember, even the class that I'm presenting to you, this American church history, is never perfect. It's never objective. I'll try my best to just deliver the information that I got from the books and then some other resources. But that's only that as far as I can do. I'm not the author of any history. I'm not an authority in the history, especially the church history. So, but I do have certain opinions and perspectives and inclination of interpretation. So please consider that to be the facts. Federation of States. United States of America, as the title says, this is the nation and state, very similar in terms that states has, the state of California, it has its own the constitution, but it is subjected under the federal constitution. That's the difference. So we have multiple states that form a federation, and some of the laws and the cultures and the system, whether it's political, social, states can have their own, in which, another word, autonomy. Autonomy means self-governing. So there's certain degree of things that you can do as a state. You have your authority and the freedom of doing it, while you're subjected under the federal umbrella, the law, the constitution. Technically speaking, you can freely join or disassemble yourself from the federation. Federation is the big body. The reason the states, whether it's California or Texas, whatever, Texas would be the first state to disassemble itself from the federation when it is possible. When it is possible means, legally speaking, you can vote, have a vote and disassemble yourself from the federation. But the reason that all the states remaining as within the umbrella of federation, because it benefits. It has much greater benefit than other benefits that you will get from being separated or disassembled. And I don't think that's going to change any soon. So as long as the states have more benefits than the disadvantage being a federation, then they'll remain as a federation. That's how it works. And that's important in understanding America, because that's not only within the political system, the culture and the ideology of people has to do with that very the dynamic. You are one, but you are still independent. See, that's kind of it's ideology that sustains America, and that ideology is coming from the Bible. See, and that's why I'm trying to explain this in very detail. So Bible, the theology of Trinity, it says one, but each Godhead, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, they are independent. At the same time, they are one. See, that's kind of idea that is melted into that federation of states. As that ideology, that idea is applied or implied with the social system, in the schools, and even in the families, especially in church. So the idea of federation of state is very one of the key elements in understanding America, because the idea of the Federation of States came out of their faith. They nurtured from their faith. And then Americanism. Okay, so naturally, it relates to the idea of Americanism. Americanism is also, you can say, American spirit. So what is American spirit? Is Americanism is the idea of economy, or is it about the politics? We can discuss this for many hours, but it depends on who you are. So that's kind of art of America. You are entitled to your own belief, your own idea, and you are free to not to be judged or criticized for having a certain idea or concept. That means you have freedom of your thoughts. Not only you're free to think, but you have freedom to express, as long as it is not against the public welfare or well-being. So most ideas you can express and have it. America in the old days, they do not do it anymore, but technically it is still possible, but no one does it. And the communism was once allowed in America. Not to our surprise, you were able to propaganda your communistic ideal in America, which has been banned. But except those, some of the thinkings that would hurt the public wealth or public well-being, public health or public well-being, you are entitled to have your opinion and to express them. That's probably the fundamental of Americanism: the freedom, the justice, and equality. See, these are some of the main idea that is embedded to the Constitution of America, USA, the United States of America. But the thing is, again, the whole idea of Americanism, whatever, if there is an Americanism, it came out of Bible. I wouldn't say the Christian religion, because being religious is quite different in America. The religion and state is technically, at least technically, legally, it is separated in America, the United States of America. Thus, states is not going to try to influence or overrule or control the religion. And the other way, religion should not come into the state's government and try to influence the government in doing its governing. But that's the idea But in reality, the Americanism or American politics still is greatly influenced, or has been, or had been influenced greatly by biblical ideal, not the Christian religion per se. So that's basic, foundation that we are going to understand and agree upon as we continue to discuss this American church history. There are some ways that the government is trying to influence religion and Christianity these days. But in the old days, until probably before the World War II, after World War II and the Korean War and Vietnam War, many things has changed since. As the America go through this, war period. But before that, before Second World War II, 1945, the things in America, the church had great influence. Even though it's not a direct influence, it had great influence in governing of America, because think of the population percentage. 60 or 70% of American population at the time, prior to World War II, were so-called Christians, and majority of them were Protestants. And it is natural for the governing body, whether they are president, all the U.S. president except the Kennedy were, whether it's nominal or true Christian, it doesn't matter. They were Protestant presidents. Obama was, in recent years, Obama, Trump, both are so-called Christians. Whether they are good Christian or bad Christian, still, they call themselves, identify themselves as Christian. So, we can safely assume at least 50% or more of people governing America, they were believers, the Protestant Christians. Because of that, it is impossible for them to distinguish their job and their faith. The work as a public servant, many of them openly confessed and even proclaimed they are trying to impose their faith, their Christian faith, to the governing of this country. So when we are talking about Americanism, if there is such a thing as Americanism, it's the root, the foundation is very biblical, and it is Christian. And the American culture today, in the year 2021, it is very difficult to identify or summarize the American culture in one sentence. That's not possible. But like I said, before the World War II, 1945, until then, even to 60s, early 60s, there is such a thing as American culture, very common, even though there is still pretty diverse from our perspective, as my perspective actually, as a nation or Korean. our culture, whether it's China, Korea, Japan, we know that our cultural identity is more uniform. There's no room for diversity. It still is, even though it's much more diverse than 30, 40 years ago. Still, compared to the American culture today, it's not that diverse. And the thing is, there is still, before World War II, you can say there was American culture. And that American culture that we call is basically Christian. They were Christian, Protestant, more like. Have you heard of this? I'm not sure if this is still valid in America, but that's the way we see the 4 years of Trump presidency, and then what had happened in the January in the Capitol in Washington, the Capitol building in Washington. I think that still stands in America. What it stands for is W is white, A is Anglo-Saxon, and P is for Protestant. See, this WASP represents the ruling majority, the power holding group of it's a kind of imaginary people group, but until 1960, until after the assassination of the President Kennedy, and Lyndon Johnson takes over, and then Ford and so on, until the Obama administration. He's the first black president ever in American history, right? So that rule has broken by Obama. White, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. It's just Protestant. That's only the common thing. Kennedy, he was white, Anglo-Saxon, but Catholic instead of Protestant. That might be one of the reasons that he was assassinated. We don't know. But there is that, something that is identified with this West thing. So as we try to understand the American church history, these elements that does not seem to be directly related to Christian religion or Christianity or the church actually has very close interaction or connection or relevancy to Christianity. So if we are to understand the American culture as someone who came from Asia or Latin America, wherever else you are from, especially when you came from Asia, just like myself or many of our students, the Chinese students, there's very big gap, not only cultural, but ideology-wise. See, for example, I'll speak for myself, the South Korea, not the North. The South Korea is quite a democratic society now, but it is not that, long. Until 80s and 90s, we're still under the rule of the militant militia, militant group who took the power by coup or coup d'etat, military uprising. So for us still, this democratic, capitalistic American society and culture is difficult to understand. But if you're trying to understand America and American culture, you cannot avoid to see into the American church, because very foundation still, the very foundation of America or Americanism or American politics and culture, it has to do with the church, faith, and especially the Protestant Christianity. So that is the very significance and importance of this class. Even though you are not a Christian yourself, this class offers some great advantage to you as a student. If you continue to study in America, and some of you plan to live and reside in America, then it is mandatory, it is a must to understand American church, the faith of America, the foundation, the very spirit. Without knowing that, you are going to be always a foreigner or alien. So we don't want to be alien if we are living in America. We want to be a part of it, at least part of it, integrated. So the education that we are offering to you, especially those who came from somewhere else other than born or raised in America, is that you integrate yourself to American culture and the nation of America. So that's one of the fundamental idea of this school, offering all this curriculum for you guys. Some of you may ask yourself, I'm not a Christian, and why do I need to study the church history, early church history, or world church history, and American church history? I'm not a Christian. I don't go to church, but still, even though you're not a believer Christian, this is important to understand America. So, understanding America. America is global America. Just like China is trying to become a global China. No one nowadays denies that. The President Xi, and he, announced. In Korea we say 일대일로, right? I heard similar in Chinese pronunciation because it's a Chinese character. 일대일로, that's the way that China sees itself in the 21st century. So global power, global America versus global China. We see a lot of these things, the conflict going on because of that, right? And ironically, the South Korea is kind of in between America and China, because our history, we know that China is a very important neighborhood. And we're in between. And we see things going on Taipei today. And then southeastern, the China Sea. You see, all these things has to do with the global America. The America, as they were involved in the First World War and the Second World War, see, that was a matter of choice for America. I mean, America could choose not to be involved in World War I or World War II until Japan, come and attack Hawaii. See, the reason that Japan attacked Hawaii, Pearl Harbor, because the America already became a global power. So they knew they had to win over America if Japan to become a global power. The same thing's going to happen with China. I mean, we don't know how aggressive both countries going to be, but the conflict's going to become more severe. I mean, we can see that from the world history. The reason that I'm, focusing on global America, the Christianity is also global America. The major leading the group or the force in world Christian Protestant trend or religion is America. I mean, the English church, the church in England, is very weak now. Of course, in Germany and France, the church is no longer a major element of culture or society. But in North America, Canada and United States of America, still the Christianity, the Protestant, the majority of population, and they're still the leading force. We don't know how long that's going to be, but we're still in early 21st century. The global America means global Christianity. So for us, the Christians all over the world, how the American church shapes itself will greatly influence the way we do our faith and religion. Another key word in understanding America and American church, before we go into American church, because the Christianity is just one of the religion. So freedom of religion, whatever the religion that is, it's going to be very important. Key. That's one of the major themes that's going to run through the whole class of doing this American church history. Freedom of religion or freedom of worship. This is a very key element that runs through the whole narrative. That means us as Christians, we have no right to accuse or persecute another religion. See, I'm making myself very clear about this. As a believer, I have no right or power to discriminate against other religion. As much as I have my freedom to worship, they have their freedom to worship. Whether it's right or wrong, that's going to be my perspective, my decision, and I can say that, but I have no right to, discriminate or persecute or disregard their presence or their faith. See, that's how, is that biblical? Yes, it is biblical. Because it is biblical, I'll do my best to protect the freedom of worship for other faith as well, as much as I try to protect my faith. So whether you're Muslim, Buddhist, or whatever else you believe, I can try to, help you to rethink about your religion, but that does not mean that, I'll have right to discriminate or put down your faith or religion. But some fundamental Christians do believe they have that right, and I don't think that is biblical. So I want you to think about this theme, the freedom of religion, until the next class. And that's going to be one major theme again throughout this class. Well, it was nice to meet you guys for this first week of our course on American church history. And I would just love to see you guys next week for another discussion of this subject. And until then, I'll probably say goodbye because time's up, and have a wonderful week, and I'll come back and see you. Take care. God bless.